You are watching The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's take you through the headlines we're tracking at the moment. The US Transportation Department finalized new rules requiring upfront disclosure of airline fees and mandates quick cash refunds for cancelled flights, as well as for delayed baggage or inoperative services like onboard Wi-Fi. US President Joe Biden has signed a bill to ban TikTok, starting a 9-month countdown until the social media app's Chinese parent company ByteDance will be forced to sell it or have it be removed from the US app stores. Israel has said it was moving ahead with its planned operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah to target Hamas, drawing a stern warning from neighbor Egypt. Ukraine, for the first time, has begun using long-range ballistic missiles provided secretly by the United States. Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi inaugurates a $514 million hydropower project in Sri Lanka, which was partly funded by Tehran and was long delayed due to international sanctions on the oil-rich nation. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has begun a critical trip to China, armed with a strengthened diplomatic hand, following Senate approval of a foreign aid package that will provide billions of dollars in assistance to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan, as well as force TikTok's China-based parent company to sell the social media platform, all areas of contention between Washington and Beijing. Our top focus: the US Transportation Department has announced new rules taking aim at two of the most difficult and annoying issues in air travel: obtaining refunds and encountering surprise fees late in the booking process. Passengers deserve to know upfront what costs they're facing and should get their money back when an airline owes them without having to ask. This is what the US transportation system believes. In fact, when things go wrong, getting compensation from an airline has often required establishing a cumbersome paper trail or spending untold hours on the phone. But under these new rules in the United States, refunds will be automatic without passengers having to request them. Refunds will be made in full, excepting the value of any transportation already used, and airlines and ticket agents must provide refunds in the original form of payment, whether by cash, credit card, or airline miles. In fact, refunds are due within 7 days for credit card purchases and within 20 days for any other mode of payment. In the United States, airlines and ticket agents are now required to display any extra fees for things like checking baggages or seat selection clearly and individually before a ticket purchase. But these rules will begin to take effect in 6 months and will be fully implemented in 18 to 24 months as per US officials. Listen to what the US Secretary of Transportation had to say, followed by Kate Fisher's report from Washington, D.C.
With the first rule that we're announcing today, the Biden-Harris administration is now requiring that if an airline cancels or significantly delays your flight, within 7 days they will be required to provide an automatic refund to the credit card that you used to book it without you having to call or wait on hold or sort through digital paperwork or haggle with that airline. Importantly, we are also changing the refund to clarify that it must be in cash by default unless a passenger actively chooses another form of compensation rather than the other way around.
Under the new Department of Transportation rules, the refunds must be issued within 7 days for credit card purchases and 20 calendar days for other payment methods. Airlines will no longer be able to offer vouchers or travel credits unless the passenger accepts alternative compensation. It also specifies that airlines must provide a full refund, including all government-imposed taxes and fees. Passengers will also be refunded for services that they paid for and they did not get, like Wi-Fi, seat selection, or in-flight entertainment. The regulations are being rolled out over the next 6 to 12 months. The department says it's also working on rules related to family seating fees. That's after complaints that children were not seated next to an accompanying adult, as well as they say they will be enhancing rights for wheelchair users. It's also trying to eliminate surprise hidden costs like baggage fees. In announcing the new rules, it said specifically that fees on bags have made up an increasing amount of airline revenue. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said that these new rules are the biggest expansion of passenger rights in the department's history. He acknowledged, though, that airlines weren't enthusiastic about the new rules, but he said that they will be able to adapt. The trade association, Airlines for America, said in a statement that its members, quote, offer a range of options, including fully refundable fares. And it said that the 11 largest US airlines had issued $43 billion in customer refunds from 2020 through 2023. Kate Fisher, NDTV, Washington.
Well, in other crucial news, a bill that would force a sale of TikTok by its Chinese owner ByteDance or ban it outright was passed by the US Senate and signed into law by President Joe Biden. Now, the process is likely to get even more complicated. The US Congress passed the measure citing national security concerns because of TikTok's Chinese ties. Both lawmakers and security experts have said that there are risks that the Chinese government could lean on ByteDance for access to sensitive data that belongs to about 170 million US users or to spread propaganda. Now, the law would allow TikTok to continue to operate in the United States if ByteDance sold it within 270 days or about 9 months, a time frame that the president could extend to up to about a year as well. Take a look at the finer details. The US Senate has voted in favor of legislation that would ban TikTok in the United States unless its owner, Chinese tech firm ByteDance, sells the popular social media app within the next year. The Senate voted after being driven by national security concerns over the potential risk of China accessing American data and conducting surveillance on them through the app.
Our actions are implemented through transparent rules and regulations with ample comment periods. And we would welcome transparency from the PRC on its national security actions and greater clarity on where it sees the line between national security and economic issues. This would provide greater stability to the relationship while also helping foster confidence for firms doing business with the PRC, which is in China's interest.
From once being a mere lip-syncing app to now hosting an array of content, TikTok has quickly become a popular app among Americans. The social media site has roughly 170 million American users, which is about half the population of the United States.
And we're ready to start.
In fact, TikTok is so popular that 9 of the US senators who voted for the legislation have official TikTok accounts, some of which are still in use. Similarly, Joe Biden's campaign officially landed on TikTok earlier this year under the username BidenHQ and currently has over 305,000 followers. Joe Biden's re-election campaign plans to stay on TikTok for at least the next year to attract young voters despite the US president's efforts to have the app banned. With content ranging from simple food recipes to breaking news reports, TikTok is a major cultural and economic powerhouse in the United States. Many users have already come out and voiced their concerns over the possible ban of the social media app and how they foresee it impacting their lives.
Banning TikTok would have a lot of consequences. For myself and a lot of people in my generation, it is a primary means for communicating and connecting with one another. Additionally, a lot of us use it for finding out about different social issues. So if it's banned, that also decreases the chances that we find out what is truly happening.
The clock is ticking as TikTok owner ByteDance has 9 months to sell the company. With Samia Afsar, Parmeshwar Bawa for NDTV. And for further clarity, joining us on the broadcast, Dr. Tara Kartha. Thank you so much, Dr. Kartha, for making time for us and joining us on the World 24/7. She's worked on terrorism and other security issues relating to the neighborhood and was a former director of the National Security Council Secretariat. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us on NDTV. You know, TikTok stands accused of being a conduit for the Chinese Communist Party, guzzling up sensitive user data and sending it to China. There's not much evidence to suggest that's true, except that their parent company, ByteDance, is a Chinese company, and China's government has its so-called private sector in a chokehold. So in order to stay compliant, you have to play nice. How do you see it?
Yeah, it's quite ironic that TikTok was originally founded in California in 2015, right? So it is, when he was asked whether he was a Chinese company, it was a bit, side. There is a separate app called, I think it's called Douyu or something in China, which is different from TikTok. But nonetheless, the bottom line is, if you've got 17 million users in the US, it's got 750 million users in China.
170 million in the US.
No, in the US, 170 million and 750 million in China. So there's a lot more users in China than in the US. So finally, it's all about money. But the fact is that if they kind of do this, in the sense, China will never let the algorithms go. And it's very significant that they're saying this is on national security grounds. And whether it is or not, which is your question, whether is it using that app or not, I mean, if they're saying it is on national security grounds, then there is something there, right? It is, what is the national security implications of TikTok's algorithms for China? That's a question worth asking. But at the same time, it is, let's face it, the whole thing will transfer, like in India, it will transfer to Instagram, it will transfer to YouTube, it will transfer to a bunch of other companies who will profit a lot. So finally, what you come down to is, it is the same doom scrolling which you'll get on TikTok or on any other app. So for domestic users, it didn't really impact domestic users a lot, even in India. But there are a lot of businesses involved. Like, I think about 750 businesses in the US are part of TikTok's operations. They're going to lose money. And look carefully at Biden's, at the congressional, they tried earlier also, by the way, to ban TikTok, and they couldn't. So the sort of generosity to say that you've got this 9 months to get your act together, sell something. After that, you've got 19-day reprieves, means there is an awareness that this probably can't be done due to First Amendment issues. I mean, they have very, very strong First Amendment rights, which is not like us. There is an individual liberty involved.
Just picking up on that, Dr. Kartha, but a broader government-imposed ban that blocks Americans from using TikTok could then face legal challenges, right, on First Amendment grounds, as you mentioned. After all, a large number of Americans, actually, including elected officials and major news organizations like the New York Times, they produce videos on TikTok. It's also ironic how Joe Biden supported the legislation while his campaign used TikTok. Essentially, it is a place where users are sharing their artwork, information, opinions about political topics like abortion rights.
Absolutely right, yes. So it is being, till now, was being used by everybody. But then the fact is that now in both countries, there is a political issue. I mean, even for Xi Jinping and all of them, they're not democracies. But for him, a question of losing face in China is a very important thing. A lot of people, even if Beijing allows the sale, he's going to lose political face significantly. In the US, it's a question of pushing back on China. After all, China banned Apple users, Apple from selling its, putting its messaging applications in the US. So basically, what you have is a kind of technological divide between, it's a kind of global technological divide between the two, which is going to have a lot of implications down the line. You'll have bans on, say, satellite using in terms of the flow of information, in terms of seabed communications. It goes into all those issues as well.
Right.
So there is much more at issue than just a thing which you're using in, your phone which you're using for entertainment. There is a lot more at stake. There
is a lot at stake. ByteDance is also considered to be one of the world's most highly valued startups. And as TikTok faces this existential crisis in America, let's see whether Blinken brings it up when he touches down while he meets all senior officials as he's in China. Thank you so much, Dr. Kartha, for joining us on The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. In other news, Ukraine has begun using long-range ballistic missiles for the first time, secretly provided by the United States against invading Russian forces. This is what American officials have now confirmed. These weapons were actually part of a $300 million aid package approved by the US president in March, and they arrived this month. They have already been used at least once to strike Russian targets in occupied Crimea, as per US media reports. But Joe Biden, as we have just reported, has now signed also a new $61 billion package of aid for Ukraine.
We are also providing Ukraine with new capabilities. I'm able to confirm, as you've heard from others, that in February, the president directed his team to provide Ukraine with a significant number of ATACMS missiles for use inside Ukraine's sovereign territory. That shipment started moving in March as part of the PDA that the president authorized on March 12th, and those missiles have arrived in Ukraine.
Switching tracks, though, Israel has said it was moving ahead with its planned operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah to target Hamas, drawing a stern warning from neighbor Egypt. The Israeli military has said that 2 reservist brigades had been mobilized for missions in Gaza, while video that circulated online appeared to show rows of square white tents going up in Khan Yunis, about 3 miles north of Rafah. We have reactions coming in, which we will line up for you and show you in a while. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in China to try to preserve the recent and delicate stabilization of ties between the United States and China as tensions over trade, territorial disputes, and national security threaten to derail relations again. But even before Mr. Blinken's plane actually approached Shanghai, the challenges ahead were apparent. He landed just hours after the US Senate passed a bill which US President Biden is expected to quickly sign into law that provides $8 billion to Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific region and could also lead to a nationwide ban on the Chinese-owned app TikTok, as we just mentioned. The political season in the United States also looms as a complication. With the presidential election nearing, Democrats and Republicans are vying to appear tougher on China. And if former President Donald Trump is re-elected, he could reverse Beijing and Washington's efforts to steady this relationship. But during Mr. Blinken's 3-day trip, which will also include a visit to Beijing, he plans to press Chinese officials on a wide range of issues, including the support for Russia, cheap Chinese exports that US officials say threaten American jobs, and Chinese ships' aggressive maneuvers in the South China Sea, a senior State Department official has informed reporters. The other crucial story we're tracking, Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi has inaugurated a $514 million hydropower project in Sri Lanka, which was partly funded by Tehran and was long delayed due to internal and international sanctions on the oil-rich nation. This was the first visit by an Iranian president to Sri Lanka since the year 2008. And Mr. Raisi was received by the Sri Lankan Prime Minister. Then the Iranian president was driven to the project inauguration site, where he was met by Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Now, according to a press release that's been issued by the Sri Lankan government, the Uma Oya multi-purpose development project costing $514 million was kicked off with $50 million provided by Iran. The Sri Lankan government and Farab Energy and Water Projects of Iran agreed back in April 2008 to implement this project. The total contract sum amounted to about $514 million, and the Export Development Bank of Iran funded $50 million only until the year 2013. But due to international sanctions imposed on Iran later that year, Tehran was unable to continue providing funds for the project. Subsequently, Sri Lanka decided to proceed with the project using government funds. Well, news and updates continue as always on NDTV 24/7. We're back in a moment after this short break. Welcome back to the United States now, where the Supreme Court has heard arguments about how close to death a woman must be to receive an abortion in states with strict bans. The Supreme Court justices appear divided over Idaho's strict abortion ban. The case, one with potentially sweeping consequences for emergency rooms across the United States, centers on a federal law requiring hospitals to provide stabilizing treatment to any patient who arrives with an emergency medical condition. The question before the Supreme Court now is whether that law, called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, cover emergency abortions, even in states where the procedure is banned. In other words, if a doctor determines an abortion is the best treatment for a patient in jeopardy, are they protected from prosecution no matter where they are? The Biden administration has said yes. It has sued Idaho over its near-total abortion ban, which has an exception for the life but not the health of the mother. A ruling, though, in the matter is expected this summer. In other news, an Indian heart is beating in a young lady from Pakistan, thanks to a life-changing heart transplant from Chennai. What's even more touching is, heart surgeons did this for free, and a trust run by doctors made it free for the poor family from Karachi. My colleague Sam Daniels spoke to the patient and surgeons at the MGM Healthcare. Listen in.
How does it feel now after the transplant?
Good, very good.
And what's your dream now once you get back to Pakistan?
Study.
What do you want to become?
Fashion designer.
Fashion designing?
Yes.
Very good, okay. And for you it was very difficult. You are a single mother, and tell us what you had to go through when your child was diagnosed with heart issue in Pakistan. It was very difficult?
Yes, मुश्किल तो बहुत था, लेकिन फिर हम लोग यहाँ पर आए. इतना ज़्यादा अमाउंट मैं नहीं कर पा रही थी. हमने वहाँ पे कैंपेन भी चलाई थी, मगर इतना अमाउंट नहीं हो रहा था.
You're relieved now? You're happy now?
Yes, sir. Too much happy.
We also have Dr. Balakrishnan and Dr. Suresh Rao. Thank you very much. Tell us about the challenges in this case, doctor.
Okay, this child came to us first in 2019. She was 14 years old. And she was very sick and with severe heart dysfunction. And if I remember right, her heart stopped. So we had to do CPR and then put her on a temporary pump called ECMO, and then another temporary pump, and then eventually we fitted an artificial heart pump called Medtronic HY, which is quite expensive. In spite of that, she became sick. The right side of the heart became sick, and the pump got infected in Pakistan, and she was very sick. She had a very severe leak of one valve called aortic valve. So the options to treat her were not simple. Mm-hmm. And eventually we run a trust along with Mrs. Chitra, which is often called Aishwarya Trust. So through that trust and my own personal finances, and then a few patients helped, we funded the entire operation for totally free for them. We got a donor heart, I think it came from Delhi. And that heart was too big for her, so actually the chest had to be kept open for almost 10 days. And then she made a slow but good recovery, and now she's ready to go back. So
how much this would have cost? And
not less than 30-35 lakhs, perhaps even more.
Right. What was that that made it so close to your heart that doctors like you put your personal finances and made sure the whole thing was free for the family?
It is because, see, she's a young girl. She could be my daughter. And once you treated them for so long, every life matters.
And doctor, when it comes to organ transplant and organ donations, Tamil Nadu, particularly Chennai, is being seen as the capital in the whole country. In this case, it's an international patient you're dealing with. What will this mean?
In other states, there are donations, but most of the times the organs are not used. Because in this case, there was an organ in Delhi and none of the hospitals wanted that organ. Now getting that organ also requires some kind of logistics. In fact, you have to get it from a chartered flight, which again will cost money. So many of the patients will refuse that. Luckily, she got a heart. There was no request, so it was allotted to her. Otherwise, international patients, it's very difficult to get the organ.
Thank you very much, doctors, for your time, and wish you all the best, Aisha and Sano.
Well, thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. We'll keep tracking the latest developments for you. Do stay tuned.